What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, April 27th, 2017. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. And the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, and ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And, yeah, for those of you on BAM User, Skype is apparently acting up for some strange reason, and it dropped our signal, but we're back on the air, obviously, right now. Before I get into the news, I want to make an observation here that I hope that the people who are monitoring this program on behalf of the government will listen to very carefully. World War II was a conventional war with bombs, bullets, tanks, aircraft, ships, and so forth. And yes, while it is true that the United States did drop 2 atomic bombs on Japan at the very end of it, it was still a conventional war. And I stress that because nobody's ever actually fought a real nuclear war. And we cannot know how it will really go. I'm sure there's been all kinds of simulations and a lot of guesswork about how it would all transpire. But we don't really know. The biggest risk, of course, is that it gets completely out of control. And in John Badham's movie War Games, it made a very powerful statement. The only winning move is not to play, because it could spiral out of control, and everybody could start shooting bombs at everybody else out of fear that bombs are on the way to them. And again, citing a quote from another movie, this one's Crimson Tide, the Denzel Washington character is having a little philosophical discussion, and basically ends by saying, in the nuclear age, the enemy is war itself. And I think we're in that position because everybody's out there talking about the known nuclear arsenals. We know from Israel's efforts to sell nuclear weapons to South Africa under the table that there could easily be nuclear weapons out there. Nobody knows where they are. Remember when George Bush accidentally outed Valerie Plame with that whole yellow cake forgery that was used to help sell that second war in Iraq? The organization she worked for was actually the CIA's front for tracking nuclear weapons around the world. And I'm sure they've replaced that capability since then. But there's a gap in information that happened after that. We don't really know. All right, so yesterday they had this briefing for all the senators at the White House. All but 3 senators showed up. And they walked out of there expressing disappointment. Now, remember, yesterday we reported on this AP story where Donald Trump only showed up for the first 5 minutes to make an opening statement. Then he left and turned the briefing over to his security advisors. But we're seeing articles like this one in the Daily Mail where senators are saying they learned very little and they couldn't get straight answers to questions. So the meeting did not go very well for the Warhawks. And another article along the same vein, this one in the Huffington Post, senators leave White House briefing on North Korea unsure about why it took place. Was it a PR stunt? Apparently the senators were very unhappy. They didn't get anything that really convinced them about the necessity to do everything. Now, more and more voices are stepping up and advising against trying to get into a conflict in North Korea. Article out of antiwar.com. Even the Pentagon is warning of heavy casualties in a new Korean war. And they're looking at, first of all, the body count from the first and still technically ongoing Korean War. We had that report about a couple of weeks ago where analysts are saying if the U.S. physically invades North Korea, they can expect at least 250,000 U.S. casualties, and that's a lot. And it would be hideously expensive. And remember the lesson from the first Korean War. Those North Koreans are willing to take a pounding before surrendering. In that regard, they're a lot like the Russians. If you remember how the losses they suffered stopping Hitler's march on Moscow. They're very, very tough people. Another article coming on out from the Southfront.org. North Korea versus South Korea, comparison of military capabilities. What would new war in Korea look like? And they're basically saying what other analysts have said. Yes, the U.S. involvement with its high-tech weapons is going to be unstoppable. But in a ground war that's fought with soldiers and artillery, North Korea can actually stand. And this article goes on to criticize North Korea, saying whose vital interests are served by maintaining a regime based on hereditary succession. And my response to that is, you mean like the Bushes and the Clintons, who seem very much intent on turning the White House into an hereditary office. Sergei Lavrov is out there saying that the U.S. heavy-handed stance on North Korea is fraught with potentially catastrophic consequences. Again, can they really keep this contained and out of control? And I think if you look at the track record of all these U.S. interventions over the last 16 years, they are never turning out the way they were planned. And that is very, very dangerous when you're in the realm of a potentially nuclear-armed adversary. And as I said earlier in the week, North Korea's mission to the United Nations implied they already have a deployable nuclear deterrent. So we need to be very careful. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, the good news is somebody somewhere may have blinked, because we are hearing from a couple of sources, in this case the Duran is one of them, that the Trump White House has backed down on North Korea and saying we are not threatening military action, or at least that's what they're saying at this moment. Another article on the same thing, this one from the New York Times. The drumbeats don't add up to imminent war with North Korea. The White House is now saying that the posturing of the Carl Vinson and all these weapons off the coast of North Korea was to deter North Korea from any more nuclear tests or ballistic missile tests, which, are they going to keep those assets there perpetually? But they're, at least the public face right now is, no, we're not really planning an attack. Of course, Trump's critics, the Warhawks, are already out there saying it's showing weakness. It's showing that the U.S. can't control a little bitty, tiny nation like North Korea. We're showing weakness. We can't do that. And we're already seeing counter-propaganda coming on out. The White House is considering putting North Korea on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, show how tough they are, even though there have been no accusations. North Korea is a state sponsor of terror. Meanwhile, there was a story just here on Fox a few minutes ago. Military commanders are out there saying the United States will shoot down any North Korea missile fired at U.S. forces. They're almost telegraphing that somebody is still considering a false flag to get this thing going. And they're out there trying to just build up the terror threat, as it were. Over at RINF.com, they have a story about North Korea has a space nuke program that's more dangerous than their ICBMs. And it's based on the idea that North Korea has successfully used their Taepodong rockets to put satellites in orbit. So they could put a nuclear bomb in orbit and just detonate it in orbit over the United States and knock out the U.S. power grid. But again, North Korea is not going to do that unless they are provoked, because they know the response would be a U.S. retaliation that would destroy their country. One of the things that's got Claire and I very, very nervous is they're really starting to pound on this idea that Hawaii is threatened by North Korea. And U.S. Pacific Forces Commander Admiral Harry Harris, Jr., testifying before the U.S. Congress just yesterday, was saying, North Korea has conducted about 60 ballistic missile tests in recent years. It's the only country to have tested nuclear devices in this century, which is only 17 years. And they're out there really ramping that up. And when you remember that Hawaii was the sacrificial lamb, the bloody shirt to get the U.S. into World War II, you can understand why we're a little bit nervous out here. Now, one of the reasons there may have been a rush gets back to the upcoming South Korea presidential election. Because as of right now, the leading candidate, the guy who's well ahead in the polls, is saying he wants to engage with North Korea, adopt a reconciliatory approach. Moon Jae-in is very much a supporter of the Sunshine Policy of reunification. And he's already signaled to the U.S. government, if he wins the presidential election, he does not want the United States involving itself in the defense of South Korea. It's going to show them the door. So I'm expecting American vote riggers are already on their way over to South Korea to make sure that he does not win that election. Now, the U.S. deployed the THAAD, the Theater High Altitude Area Defense Missile. And this is very controversial. And it has angered China to the point where they are now staging live fire drills to demonstrate their might. They're testing new weapons, and they're already back to talking about this brinksmanship in the South China Sea. So instead of worrying about a potential war starting with North Korea, now we're looking at war with China, which is a much, much more serious matter. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there with a story warning that Trump is now a captive of the deep state. It certainly does seem to be the case. Like I said, yesterday's White House meeting with the senators, he only made opening statements for 5 minutes, and then he left. And there are other indications that Trump has been brought to heel. We'll get into that in a minute. But right now, apparently, according to a new ABC News Washington Post poll, the majority of Americans, well, actually about half of Americans, say there is a deep state that is actually controlling the country, and it's a big problem. And it is, because we have lost our democracy. We are living in a deep state dictatorship, whether you call it deep state, shadow government, or the oligarchs. And they're out there running around playing like Middle Ages warlords. And that, too, is very dangerous in the nuclear age. Now, according to Ron DeSantis, member of Congress, he's got oversight over the U.S. embassies. Apparently, Donald Trump, on his next visit to Jerusalem, is going to announce that the U.S. will, in fact, move their embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So he's caved on that issue. And another one, Ernst Zundel, who's out of jail, is being denied permission to move to the United States from Germany, even though his wife is an American citizen. And so apparently Trump's Department of Homeland Security is saying it's not worth consideration. He is banned from the country because he's got those double plus ungood thoughts. So one of the depressing things that Claire and I are dealing with is, after all the work we did last year, nothing really has changed in the United States. Israel is still calling the shots. We're still heading to wars. The economy is still heading for an ultimate collapse. Now, last night, Israel bombed what they're claiming is a Hezbollah depot near the Damascus airport. They're justifying it by saying there were Iranian weapons in there, and it is Israel's policy to not allow Iran weapons to fall into the hands of Hezbollah. My big question is, at what point does Syria and Russia stop tolerating these incursions and start going after those aircraft? Now, remember, Syria did down one of the Israeli warplanes a while back, and Israel literally came out with this threat that if Syria shoots at any more of Israel's warplanes, Israel would destroy all of Syria's air defense systems. And remember, we all know that Israel actually does have nuclear weapons as well. Meanwhile, intelligence veterans continue to slam this recent claim that Assad gassed his own people at Idlib. They're calling it an outright fraud. They're calling it politicized intelligence. For political need, we have to change the intelligence to say what we want it to say, which is a fancy way of saying, yeah, they're lying to us. They're lying to us. And because of the government's need to maintain an illusion of infallibility, once a lie is told, they have to go on telling it. They can't back off of it. Even though the United Nations came on out and said that the 2013 and 2014 gassing attacks were done by the U.S.-backed rebels, the official policy of the U.S. government is Assad did it, Assad did it, Assad did it. Meanwhile, the Syrian army has regained the initiative following that cruise missile attack by Trump. They're making gains in Homs province now, recapturing the key Ashar gas field and the Ashir gas plant. And this is going to cut into ISIS' economic base for war, because what ISIS has been doing in Syria all along is stealing Syria's oil and gas, smuggling it out of Syria through Turkey, and selling it on the world market. And the more they take away those oil fields and refineries from ISIS, the more the cash dries up. I'm sure ISIS will call up the U.S. government and say, send more money, and the U.S. government will comply. The other day I was talking about how this three-front war was getting really, really confusing, and other people are starting to pick up on that. Rinf.com has a story. Our Turkish allies just attacked our Kurdish allies. Whose side are we on? And it is illustrative of just how confused and convoluted our policy in the Middle East has become. Amazing here. Now, very interesting article out of Global Research. The ISIS expansion in Afghanistan is pointed at Russia. And basically, Russia is turning up their efforts to block U.S. encroachment in the region, especially to the northward of Afghanistan. Because if you look at Afghanistan on a map, it borders three former Soviet republics, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan, as well as Iran and Pakistan. And so Afghanistan may be seen as a potential jumping-off point for the further encirclement of Russia by the United States. And I don't know how long Putin's going to put up with that. Putin is facing a problem in his own government. The hardliners are saying, we're going to have to fight the U.S. sooner or later, better that we do it now. And past a certain point, if Putin refuses to take action, he may be removed. There may be a regime change in Russia, but it won't be the one that George Soros and the globalists want. They're going to get hardliners in there, and that is going to make the situation much, much worse. Speaking of Afghanistan, the U.S. Army just announced it's sending another 1,500 soldiers to Afghanistan. There's a reason they call that place the death of empires. It has been the ruination of many a country throughout history, including the former Soviet Union. Rex Tillerson is still out there saying that the sanctions against Russia are going to remain until Russia returns Crimea. Remember what I said a little while ago about once they tell a lie, they keep telling it over and over again. They can't go back on it. And we know this claim that Russia stole Crimea is a lie. That isn't what happened there. But all of our current foreign policy is being based on this library of lies and false claims. And everybody who's paying attention knows it. And it's one of the reasons why other countries simply cannot trust anything the United States says anymore. Now, we're hearing that Donald Trump is planning a major trip to Saudi Arabia. He's going to be talking about massive weapons deals for the Saudis, for them to go on using on Yemen, along with civilian nuclear technology, as well as air defense systems to put them on an equal footing with Iran. So Donald Trump's campaign promise of getting out of all this foreign intervention was another campaign lie, or he's been controlled. And at this point, I don't care. To me, it no longer matters if he's lying versus he was blackmailed or threatened to go along. It doesn't matter. We're dealing with the end result. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take a phone call. Billy in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Billy.
Hey, Mike. Aloha.
Aloha.
How you doing, buddy?
So what's on your mind today?
I wanted.
Yeah.
I was watching another website, and I think Benjamin Netanyahu has a bigger claim to the Trump administration than what a lot of people might realize. I mean, you could investigate it more, I imagine, but it said that there are like 20 Zionists, like Rothschild Zionists, Jewish people, all like Goldman Sachs recruits and all, like 20 of them. As soon as he started his administration, I just thought it was bad enough he didn't get rid of Reince Priebus, and he's got his son-in-law in there, and his daughter seems like, she wants to open the borders up and everything, but for Syrian refugees. But I think it's a lot more involved than just, skimming the surface of what she might have said something that leaked out. But I just think it's a lot more involved than what people think with, Trump's ties with Israel. I think it might be more involved than what people might think with all the Zionist representatives he has in his administration. What do you think? What's your view?
My view is we're living under foreign puppet rule. Washington, D.C. is a Vichy government and has been for quite a long time.
Yeah. It's bad, man. I just think a lot of this stuff is mirroring what JFK went through. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think and sadly, I don't know. More and more, I'm starting to think that if you really, maybe I was in denial for a long time as far as when he was running his campaign, but my girlfriend, she never liked Trump, and she was like, I don't know, man, you're all head over heels with him, and, for everything he's saying, but, he comes from a banking industry where a lot of, real estate, and he was around bankers most of his life, and now if you look at the real deal with everyone he actually has and has had since he's from day one. I mean, maybe, a lot of people that liked him because of everything he was saying, I hate to say it, but I think maybe he conned everybody. I don't know what to think at this point. I'm just disgusted with all this war stuff, and
at this
don't
point,
know what's going to happen.
Well, first of all, it would have been exactly the same under President Hillary, only moving a lot faster on steroids. And at this point, I don't care what happened, whether Trump succeeded in conning us all during last year, or if he got into the White House and he was told point blank, you're just a figurehead, we're really running the country. Remember what Jesse Ventura told the story about when he won his governorship, and his first day in the governor's mansion. A group of men came to see him and said, okay, this is what's going to be happening while you're governor. And they basically laid it down and told him point blank. He was just a figurehead. He was threatened. His family was threatened if he didn't go along. And that's why he never ran for a second term. And that may have happened to Donald Trump. They may have shown him the Zapruder film and say, we can and have killed presidents and gotten away with it for not being cooperative. But whatever it is, we have to stop wondering what happened and just look at what happened and dealing with the aftermath of what happened. And I know a lot of people are regretting supporting Donald Trump, but it would have been exactly the same, probably a lot worse, under Hillary. And once again, we voted for the lesser of two evils, and we still get evil. And that is a stupid way to be running the country.
Yeah, I really think, the shadow government has really exposed itself to where just everybody knows what's going on now. I think it's just a matter of time before, if something bad does happen, say it's a false flag nuke or anything, the next time something happens, there's a lot of people to where, like you said many times, it's not 1963 anymore. A lot of people are more aware of what's going on and why it's happening. So, God bless you, man, for all the work you do, and our prayers are with you being over here in Hawaii, because, man, they're talking about, it's inevitable. This is going to happen with North Korea, and it's inevitable. I mean, we're, worried for you and Claire over there, man.
No, we're concerned as well, and the important thing here is we all know the economy is coming up on a big crash, And if they don't have a war to blame it on, then the American people are going to blame the bankers and the politicians for the economic crash, and they're not going to let that happen. And so the fact that they're backing off of North Korea, to me, is not that significant. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're going to take two more phone calls, and we're going to close the lines because we've got a lot to talk about. Donna in New Mexico, aloha. Welcome to the radio show. What is on your mind today?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. I want to talk about two things. One of them's big, and one of them's kind of gone under the radar. The deployment of the THAAD missile defense system. Both Russia and China, as you know, are responding right now and taking proactive measures to take protective measures for their countries because it's a threat to them. And what I didn't know until yesterday, and you might have even had this on what really happened, Russia came out last evening and said that they know that the THAAD missile defense system can be refitted to be to deploy Tomahawks as opposed to being defensive, become offensive. And that is a threat. Even though THAAD, technically they say it's only good, effective against short, medium, and intermediate range missiles.
I have to tell you, I'm having a little bit of a problem with that because the THAAD and the Tomahawks are so completely different. There really isn't much point using a THAAD system to launch a Tomahawk because the THAAD system, it's sort of a follow-on to the Patriot. There's a ground-based radar that is looking for incoming threats, ballistic missile threats, and then there are the launchers with the actual THAAD missiles, which will intercept the incoming threat by hitting them, is basically what's going on there. The Tomahawks are guided by a variety of sensors, including GPS, and they don't need a ground-based radar to direct them. And for that point, they don't really need a big launching truck either. They can be fired off of a standard vertical launch tube or airdrop. So that part I'm a little concerned about. The reason THAAD is seen as a threat is because it shifts the balance of power. Once you put up a THAAD, then you can put up offensive missiles behind it, which are then able to fire into the other country with impunity because that country can now not retaliate to deter the initial attack. And that's why China and Russia are very nervous. Now, there is one point we all need to keep in mind. The THAAD is based on the existing U.S. ballistic missile defense doctrine of a predictable ballistic path of the inbound threat. And we know both Russia and China now have warheads that are maneuverable in order to evade interception by a THAAD. And so that is going to change that dynamic as well. But China is very upset because once you put up a wall, then you can fling things over it with impunity, and that's what they're concerned about, given the recently displayed belligerence of the United States.
Absolutely, and I knew you would clarify that, and thank you. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and this really to me went under the radar, was the deployment of the USS Vincent strike group, and how it was touted widely by Trump and so on that it was heading for the Korean Peninsula, when in fact it was going another direction entirely. And what really struck me about that whole thing was it was gone. It was missing for like days and days and days, and then finally the statement was issued by the White House saying, well, there was a little glitch in communications between the Pentagon and the White House. Now that's a direct line.
Yeah, I remember. And
a few days ago,
can I put that back in context? I mean, the White House is now admitting that the show of force was to scare Kim Jong-un off of further nuclear and ballistic missile testing. And there were elements of it being a bluff, because along with saying that the USS Carl Vinson was approaching the coast of North Korea when it was actually down in Indonesia, they were also saying that the USS Nimitz and the USS Ronald Reagan were on their way to the coast of North Korea, which in the case of the Ronald Reagan, it's really not a usable ship anymore because it's hopelessly contaminated from the Fukushima disaster. So it's a perfect vessel for a false flag to get sunk and blamed on somebody. But as an actual combat platform, anybody who serves on it for any length of time is going to get sick.
Well, more to my point, was that a couple of days ago, one of the admirals, I forget his name, came out and said, "Yeah, we apologize. There was a misunderstanding or this technical glitch." How do you even if your point is accurate, and it could be that it was a bluff, it just makes us look foolish and stupid.
Oh, it does.
It's not a very good bluff. And at the same time, the idea that the Pentagon and the White House aren't communicating properly, to me, sends a very, very bad signal to all of us. Yeah, I don't want to think that at any given moment, especially since I'm against war, period, but that they would have a glitch like that, and that's the way they're just both describing it. I just thought that was not something that they did not express that in the correct way.
Well,
and that's all I had to say.
Okay, well, the idea that it was a glitch, I don't think so. For one thing, Trump is apparently giving the Pentagon a lot of autonomy to decide the war policy. And the Pentagon, obviously the Carl Vinson was down in Indonesia as part of a drill, an exercise. And it may have been that Donald Trump said, "I want that off of North Korea," and the Pentagon said, "Well, we'll send it after we're done in Indonesia," and that may be the source of the communication. Regardless of what actually transpired behind the scenes, you are correct. It makes the U.S. Look very bad to the world. It makes it look like our chain of command from the President to the Pentagon to the forces in the field is not very good at all. And that has a significant impact on the tactical effectiveness of our combat units.
And I'll leave you with a question, if I may. And you might have addressed this. I missed a few minutes of the show. But the recent announcement, I think it was just today, that Trump is going to give the military pretty much free latitude to decide how many troops they want to deploy to Iraq, Syria, or any place else.
Yeah, we hadn't gotten to that yet, but we were going to mention it.
Okay. I'll wait to listen for that. And thank you so much. And you guys be safe over there.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the phone line so I can catch up on the news. Wes in Idaho, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. Separation of church and state. I want separation of synagogue and state. This thing yesterday of Donald Trump attending this memorial ceremony, it looked every bit religious to me. I mean, you got a cantor actually singing and eulogizing Eli Wiesel, that lowlife. What about Ernst Zundel or Fred Loister or Gamar
Well, we
Rudolph?
already talked about Zundel here. The barrier of separation between church and state does not mean that politicians cannot follow their own religious leanings and go to various services and so on. The idea of a barrier between church and state is that no one religion has any special favor in the sense of the law over others, because the Founding Fathers were not so far removed from the religious wars that almost destroyed Great Britain between the Catholics and the Protestants, and they did not want that to happen in their still brand new and very fragile country. So that was the reason for no establishment of religion being given any respect under the law. But there's nothing about the separation of church and state that says a politician can't go to church on Sunday. And synagogues are kind of included with that, because church is a generic term meaning all places of worship, whether it is a temple, a synagogue, a minaret, a mosque, wherever the voodoo campfire, whatever it is, the Pastafarians. It's a generic term. Anyway, Wes, going to let you go, and we're going to close the phone lines now because I got to get to some of this other news here. Now, I was saying before that the bind that we are all in here, and the reason why I don't see the backing off from North Korea as being any kind of a indication of a change of long-range permanent U.S. policy. We know the U.S. economy is heading for another major implosion, probably a lot worse than 2008, potentially a lot worse than the 1930s, and actually they were pretty close as it is. And unless they have an enemy to blame it on this next economic crash, the American people are going to blame the private central bankers and their enablers in the government, because we have seen these problems occur time and time again. We're always getting these promises, we will fix this, we will regulate it, then the regulations get taken away and the problems recur all over again. And so the American people are going to blame the government for this next economic crash unless they have got a major war to unite the country to get us to forget all about the corruption and the looting and the plundering and this other abusive behavior, and basically, do as we're told by the government. And there's another article along the same lines here, this one from Patriot Rising, basically saying that a war is expected to prop up the approval ratings of the administration, which are not good at all, and neither are the ratings for Congress or the government as a whole. I don't think there's ever been a time in our nation's history, with the possible exception of the South prior to the Civil War, where there has been this much disdain for the central federal government. And right now, because they refuse to change their behavior, the situation's only going to get worse. And that is another reason why they're going to have to get a major war going somewhere. And maybe it's not going to be North Korea, but it's going to be somewhere. And we were talking earlier in the week where they're already talking about going into, a few more countries and start interventions there. And now we're hearing that there may be a coup underway in Macedonia. And everybody knows the U.S. justifications for all of this is a big heaping pile of bovine excrement. Sputnik News has an article out there describing us as the United States of false flags. And it says the United States government is the world leader in purveying false flags and propaganda stunts, or to put it more generally, systematic lies to justify the outrageous violations of international law, wars, and aggression. Absolutely right. We, the American people, are the most lied to people on the face of the earth. We are lied to a degree that would make Goebbels blush. And here's a statistic you might want to stick in your memory for future reference. Since the end of World War II, the United States government has killed more than 20 million people in 37 victim nations. 20 million people in 37 nations killed by the U.S. government since the end of World War II, under the guise of humanitarian intervention, regime change. The body count is already piling up to World War levels. Another article, this one out of Desert Peace, America's Global Decline. It's talking about the U.S. government's exaggerated sense of power and imaginary sense of mission. The rest of the world is seeing it as delusional self-righteousness behind all of these invasions and interventions. And it's accelerating the United States' global decline. We are an empire in decline. We're showing all the symptoms. There are so many parallels between what is going on in the United States today and what preceded the collapse of the Soviet Union or the collapse of the Roman Empire. And the real tragedy is those who profit from it. The deep state, the oligarchs, whatever you want to call them, the government, they clearly do not want to change what's going on. And that means the doom of this nation is inevitable, either in a crash, collapse, or a world war that we will lose. Now, down in Turkey, Erdogan has issued warrants for 3,224 people over alleged links to the failed coup d'etat last July. And Erdogan is still apparently operating on the suspicion that ultimately the United States was behind it, because he was showing way too much independence. And it wouldn't be the first time in history that the U.S. government puts in a ruler, and then the ruler starts to get too big for their britches, and the U.S. takes him out. Saddam Hussein rose to power in Iraq with the assistance of U.S. intelligence agencies, and when he decided he was going to sell Iraq's oil for the euro instead of the dollar, they took him out. Apparently there was another attempt at a terror attack near Parliament, and police arrested a man with a backpack full of knives. And they're saying it's one suspect following an incident in Whitehall, and apparently the suspect was detained following a stop and search as part of an ongoing operation. I don't know what he's going to accomplish with a backpack full of knives. That's going to be a lot of weight. Are we sure this guy wasn't just selling knives on a street corner? Because I've seen that happen. They're out there. Now then, as our caller from New Mexico mentioned, Donald Trump is going to let the Pentagon decide their own troop levels in all of these areas of involvement. And I don't think the Pentagon is going to start withdrawing forces. As I mentioned earlier in the show, they've already announced an additional 1,500 going to Afghanistan. And our current military forces are already stretched very thin, which means when there is a false flag or a big bang of some kind, I'm expecting that draft bill that's been sitting in committee for all these years to be sent to the floor of the Congress. And maybe that'll wake up the American people, because it was that draft legislation that really fueled the resistance to the war in Vietnam. Another factor that we need to remember when deciding who is going to win or lose the coming war is that ultimately wars are for and about money. And the United States spends hideous amounts of money on hideously expensive weapon systems that are also very expensive to maintain and repair when they get shot down. And in any war, the country that runs out of money first is the country that loses. And once again, we're seeing another article about this latest helicopter, the King Stallion. And it is already going to cost more per aircraft than the F-35. The military-industrial complex loves expensive weapons because they're bid under what's called cost plus, meaning whatever we spend on the weapon, we add a percentage to, and that's the final price. So the more they can justify spending on the weapon, the bigger their profit will be. And that is a major, major issue. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Right now, President Trump is making a speech about, he signed an executive order to create a new office of VA oversight, which sounds really good, but ever since the scandal broke of the incredibly criminal neglect shown to our wounded veterans by the VA years ago, we keep hearing all the time, oh, we're putting new systems in place, it's going to be okay, it's going to be better, you don't need to worry about it. And so I'm not expecting it's going to get any better now. And if they really start marching into a major war, there's going to be a lot more wounded veterans. And maybe that's why they're backing off on North Korea, because of the high cost of a ground invasion. They're estimating 250,000 American servicemen dead. That would probably translate to 500,000 permanently wounded and disabled who would have to be taken care of. All right, getting on back to politics and corruption. Apparently, Huma Abedin's family is now under federal investigation, and Huma herself is cited in one of her relatives' Wall Street corruption case. And apparently they're being prosecuted for conspiracy, wire fraud, and securities fraud. Is a politician corrupt? When aren't they? That's what they do. And the sad reality is, and it's a curse on the human condition, that people like this are getting into positions of wealth and power because they're willing to do things ordinary moral people won't. Lie, cheat, steal, kill, commit fraud, so forth and so on. Now, do you remember former Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano? Apparently, she has come under severe criticism in relation to her job over at the University of California. And apparently, state auditors discovered Napolitano had a hidden rainy day fund or slush fund that nobody was supposed to know about to the tune of $175 million, and this fund existed at the same time the university system was claiming to be in dire financial straits and requesting a funding increase. And they're not even sure how the surplus was accumulated. There seems to be a cover-up involved with that. Napolitano is saying the slush fund is only $38 million. It's still a slush fund. And the auditor is also saying between the years 2012 and 2016 that the university, under Napolitano, inflated funding need estimates. Now then, getting on back to the White House. Apparently, Jared Kushner has business ties with one of Israel's richest families. Oh, there's the music. We're going to do station identification. We'll come back with more about this story. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And we're talking about this story where it turns out Jared Kushner has strong business ties with one of Israel's richest families. And apparently, according to reports published in Bloomberg and the New York Times, the ties between the two families include high-stake real estate deals in Manhattan worth more than $150 million. And Bloomberg says at least 15 different buildings in downtown Manhattan are co-owned by Raz Steinmetz, nephew of diamond dealer Benny Steinmetz, and by Kushner family's Kushner companies. The two also invested together in a project bearing Donald Trump's name in New Jersey. A lot of people have written in to say why I have politics and corruption as a single tag, and this is exactly the reason. Now then, Chelsea Clinton just got another award for doing absolutely nothing. They're trying to create a legend of Chelsea the humanitarian and all the rest of it. And of course, she got her Varieties Achievement Award, and now she just got another one, the annual City Harvest Award for Commitment in Fighting Hunger in New York City. And it turns out that on a single day earlier this year, she helped City Harvest pack some grapefruit. And for that, she got this award. Showering her with all of these awards as a prelude to her attempting to run for Congress. Now, Chelsea Clinton's own personal worth right now is $15 million, including a $10.5 million condo in Manhattan. So she's doing very, very well. Much of her official wealth comes from her position on the Clinton Foundation. And by the way, speaking about the world of politics getting really, really weird, Caitlyn Jenner, in an interview, recently said that it would consider running for public office. Based on what? Being an athlete, being transsexual. Doesn't look like a really strong resume for running a city, a county, a state, or whatever. That's what's going on here. Little bit of good news, though. Platte River Networks is being referred for prosecution. Now, Platte River Networks was the company that took over management of Hillary Clinton's private email server after it was moved out of the Clintons' own home. And apparently, because they withheld materials from the committee that was investigating the email server, they basically interfered with the investigation. They obstructed justice. And so now they're looking at prosecution. That would be good. Everybody is still screaming about the Russians hacked the election, the Russians hacked the DNC emails, blah, 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 blah. And here's the point. Whoever hacked or leaked the DNC revealed that the Democrats were cheating in the primaries and the election. So why aren't the Democrats being investigated? Why isn't that corruption being looked at? They just want to go after who leaked the information out. And that has become almost a hallmark of the American society. People do bad things, The only crime is making it public. Whether it's cheating on the election, Wall Street fraud, child molestation, these people want to go on doing what it is they're doing. They just get very angry when somebody dares to say, hey, I think what you're doing is wrong. I am actually getting emails. Apparently the RBN Shoutcast has gone dead. I'm sending a message to our control room. We've been having problems. We had the problem with Skype, and again, we're in an age where there's just a huge amount of hacking going on. All righty. Here's where it gets really juicy. One of Trump's state campaign chairs is being arrested for child sex trafficking that he was doing while the campaign was on. You want to talk about reckless behavior. Judge Tim Nolan's down there in Kentucky, and he was in charge of Trump's state campaign. And he's not only a judge, he's involved with the daycare center, but apparently had taken control of an underage minor, plied them with alcohol, and then rented them out for sexual purposes multiple times. Nasty, nasty. Now then, recent Gallup poll is showing that most Americans think the news is biased and inaccurate, and this refers to the corporate media. 62% of Americans believe the media favors the Democratic Party over the GOP, and 55% of Americans believe that our news organizations are often inaccurate, which is putting it politely. But the numbers are very telling. The corporate media is losing the war for the minds of America. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, as you know, Bill O'Reilly has left Fox Network. Tucker Carlson took over the spot, and he is getting really good numbers. His numbers from just the new time slot, just short of matching O'Reilly's final numbers prior to his departure. And prior history is going to show they're probably going to go on up as he builds his audience. So good for Tucker Carlson. Now, yesterday we were talking about how ESPN is having to lay off people, including some of their on-air talent. They're not doing very well. And I speculated that it may be because people just aren't getting into the sports as much as they used to. And as it turns out, there was something else. And I'm going to preface this by saying I personally don't watch ESPN. So I was unaware of this. But apparently ESPN was starting to introduce non-sports programming, which basically were detours into liberal political proselytization. And apparently the ESPN viewing public found that very distasteful. Let's talk a little bit about the economy. U.S. consumers are tapped out. Credit card defaults surged to a 4-year high, and it is getting worse. 2 weeks ago, J.P. Morgan launched their first quarter earnings season. They apparently had they had almost $1 billion in charge-offs, which means there's $1 billion in credit card debt they know they're not going to be able to collect, and they just wrote it off, the highest in 4 years. One of the problems that Americans are dealing with is they're having to actually resort to their credit cards more and more for emergencies. They don't have savings. Something bad happens, you have to use the credit card. More and more companies are refusing cash to force you onto the credit cards, to force you further in. Article coming out of the LA Weekly, Are High-Interest Personal Loans a Necessary Evil? And it's talking about how in Los Angeles, in the poorer communities, they're not really being served by the commercial depositor banks. And so you're starting to see more and more of these payday loan companies which have absolutely sky-high interest rates and are basically economic scams. Now, if they were doing it on a street corner, they'd be arrested for loan sharking, but because they have a business front, they're allowed to get away with it. And there are more and more companies that are allowed to sort of skirt the intent of laws. As you know, in most states, gambling is illegal. But you've probably seen these TV commercials for these online bidding sites where if you win the bid, you can get a very nice product for 10 or 20 bucks. And it sounds too good to be true, and it is, because what happens is you have to pay for every bid you put in. And that's how these operations make their money. It is, in fact, gambling, but the payoff is not in money, but in a product. And that allows them to evade the gambling laws. I was watching on American Pickers. I love the show. And they had this recent episode where they showed this little machine that had sat in a bar where you could put in a nickel and it may or may not give you a cigar. And it was not considered gambling because there was no monetary payout. You just occasionally would get a cigar. And these bidding sites are basically the updated version of the same thing. Now then, over in Silicon Valley, there's been a lot of reckless investment going on there. And there was a company called Klinkle that was going to produce an app on your phone that would manage all of your payments. And that was the promise, and it was founded in 2011 by a guy in his early 20s. And there was a lot of generated buzz, and they've got a huge amount of funding. Now, most Silicon Valley startups are high risk, and they can maybe expect a few $100,000 in development money, but Klinkle got $25 million, and the company just burned right through it. And at the end of it all, Klinkle never actually built the product. And this is becoming a more and more recurring story in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley startups have been able to raise unbelievable amounts of cash, and yet most of those companies haven't managed to turn a profit ever. Some of them are even saying in their prospectus, we're not sure that we will ever be into profits. Please invest in us anyway. And there's always people out there willing to do that. Maybe they're being used as cash sinks by the tech billionaires who need to bury money someplace to get into a lower tax bracket. And that is something that does happen on a regular occasion. My very first job in commercial radio was at a AM/FM simulcast station. I'm not going to put out the call letters because they're under new ownership. And all the station's format was the golden oldies. And all my job was to play the golden oldies, manage the transmitter, and back announce the music. And that was it. That was all we did all day long. And it was losing money hand over fist. But it was a cash sink for the owner's other business ventures to try and limit tax exposure. So a lot of that stuff really happened. Now, here is a good example of where automation can actually lead to more jobs being created, because recently Panera Bread automated their ordering process. You can order online, and the result was a surge in demand coming from the automated ordering, and Panera just announced they're going to be hiring 10,000 workers. See, humans and robots can peacefully coexist. It's when the robots are replacing humans that you're going to get into all kinds of tension here. All right, another little story here. Global market cap hits $50 trillion for the first time ever as all eyes turn to the Trump tax plan. And apparently there are a lot of people who are looking at it and saying it's good for business people. It's not necessarily going to be that good for ordinary working people. It certainly is something that is being looked on with favor by the large Wall Street corporations who are going to be paying much, much less in taxes on these huge sums of money that they are taking out of the economy here. Now, we posted a video that is really very, very well done. It's one of my favorites. It's up there with the stuff that James Corbett puts out. And the title of the video is The Economic Hitman Awareness. So when you next go to whatreallyhappened.com, just search for that string, Economic Hitman Awareness, or even just Economic Hitman, and watch that video. And it shows you very clearly the real dynamic behind how the U.S. and corporations go into a country, plunder it of its natural resources, crush the general population into poverty, and deal with any resistance. And it's a pattern we have seen repeated time and time and time and time again. Now, earlier in the week, there was buzz that Donald Trump was going to cancel NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which a lot of people have said was, again, benefits a few at the expense of the many. And Trump apparently had his leash yanked because now Trump is saying they're not going to withdraw from the North American Free Trade Agreement. And Trump is now saying that there may be a renegotiation, a slight change, but we're not getting rid of it. We're hearing the same thing about Obamacare. They're not really going to repeal it. They're just coming up with a replacement, slightly modified plan. And we are hearing, this is courtesy of this article from RIF.com, that the Trump administration and Congress are starting to reach deals on the sticking points on Obamacare. And basically, they're continuing the Obamacare subsidies. And apparently, this was another bargaining chip for the emergency spending bill, which supposedly will be voted through tomorrow because at midnight tomorrow night, the U.S. government officially runs out of money. Okay. Go ahead and do this. Over in Great Britain, there's an anti-Brexit champion. Gina Miller, the campaigner behind a successful Supreme Court Brexit challenge, has now raised $385,000 in a bid to unseat Eurosceptic members of Parliament in the June 8th general election. The money is piling on in there. Theresa May was hoping she could solidify the Brexit, and the pro-Europe faction is now seeing it as an opportunity to purge Parliament of anybody who refuses to support the globalist regime. So that's going to be a very interesting election to watch. Meanwhile, the European Union has already started issuing maps of the European Union in which Britain has been left out. So at least some people in the EU are seeing this as being a done deal. I think what they're working for is to find some way to let Great Britain go back to being Great Britain, but still avail themselves of British wealth to keep the EU's economic system propped up. We're hearing all this talk about the divorce payments and demanding the open borders be maintained. And so it's going to be a Brexit in name only, but Great Britain is still going to be tangled up in the European Union's refugee problem and economic problem. Now, Hungary's prime minister is clearly on the warpath against Brussels. He's been out there making a lot of statements, and he's bang spot on. His latest one is out there saying George Soros has ruined the lives of millions of Europeans. And yes, he has, and not just in Europe. Everywhere Soros goes on in to play his globalization games, people are suffering horrendous hardships, repression, oppression. And we are seeing this global oligarchy of these billionaires who think having a lot of money has given them a right to be rulers of the world. And it hasn't. They're not elected. They don't represent the people. They represent themselves. They're potentates. They're tyrants. They're dictators. They're unaccountable as well as being unelected. Over in Austria, their president has made this bizarre statement that soon all women will have to wear headscarves in solidarity so that the Muslim women are not feeling ostracized or left out. It's insane. The world has gone insane. It really has gone insane. Apparently, Marine Le Pen is still closing in on Macron for the upcoming round 2 election. And huge amounts of money are pouring into Macron's campaign from the establishment, from the globalists. And I'm predicting right now there will be massive amounts of election fraud in this election. And they'll blame it on Russia. Russia wanted... Who knows? We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're dealing with some technical issues over here at RBN. We're trying to get that all sorted out. All right, getting on back to the news. Interestingly enough, the British government has issued a request. Oh, and by the way, we've opened the phone lines again, 800-313-9443. The British government has just asked Facebook to be more vigilant about taking down fake news because people who use it as a news source might be misled. In other words, Facebook has become the handmaiden of the official propaganda, and the British government is concerned about the unofficial story getting on out. And let's see. Yeah, there's the... Okay. All righty. Yeah, I'm sorry to be hemming and hawing, but I'm looking at all this email coming on in talking about trouble reaching RBN. So RBN is aware of the problem here. So the British government is asking Facebook effectively to help influence the election by filtering what the British people are allowed to read. Now, getting back on over to Los Angeles, there's been a new poll out where Los Angeles residents have a growing fear that there will be more major riots. And there have been a lot of riots and protests, but people are concerned about a repeat or even something worse than the 1992 Los Angeles riots, which raged for days, caused over $1 billion in damages, and had to be stopped by the military. And both Claire and I were living in Los Angeles when that was happening. It was a very, very scary time. But there's a lot of unrest in the streets of America for a wide variety of reasons. I was having an email debate with somebody about that United Airlines dragging that Chinese doctor off the plane. And they would say, well, you know, it was United Express. It was actually run by Republic and all the rest of it. And my response to that was, I think the reason people responded to this story the way they did, the reason it went viral, was not because of the actual incident itself so much as a general rage growing among the American traveler at how they're being treated while they travel, by TSA, by the airlines themselves, by the cabin staff. Because certainly courtesy, and politeness, and concern about the comfort of the traveling public are gone. They're all acting like you should be grateful you're being allowed on their plane in the first place. And if they have to shift you at a later flight, you should just accept that, even if you miss this $10,000 cruise that you can't get your money back for. And that actually happened on one of these other flights. Lady was bumped from a flight to Italy. The next flight was 2 days later, and by the time she got there, the cruise ship had set sail. Now, as you know, earlier in the week, we had a call into the show where it was announced at the courthouse steps that a mistrial was declared in the first Bundy trial. And there's an interesting little analysis that came on out from the 21st Century Wire talking about the real issue remains the federal land policies. And whether or not the government has exceeded the bounds of the Constitution, which they certainly have. There is a limit in the Constitution that's called the Enclave Clause, in which the federal government is only allowed to own land on which government enclaves sit, meaning the federal government buildings, military bases, federally built infrastructure like harbors and airports and so forth. There is also a provision in the Enclave Clause that such land acquisition has to be approved by the legislature of the state in which the land resides, or is located, rather. Just carving off huge chunks of land and declaring it a national monument is outside that. A national monument is not a federal enclave. It's not a military base. It's not a harbor. And as a matter of fact, Donald Trump has announced that he is reviewing this very policy. So, we got to take another break for commercials. Back with a phone call after these few. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're still dealing with all of our little technical issues here. Okay, so we have a caller on the line, Sherry in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Here's a way to have a voice other than taking to the streets. This is regarding the demonstration in the streets. You could, if there's a new party, you were talking about a new party last time, and I hope you'll be talking about it more in the future. And socialism is not a good name. Progressive has been done. I think calling it something different and new, like the People's Party, is going to really maybe help a lot. There's a way to have a voice by rather than taking to the streets to demonstrate, by getting hooked up with this party and having it, if it suits the people that are demonstrating. It's just that a movement created by disappointed Trump supporters makes me a little nervous, because I know it's what the corporate media wanted, and this whole new name, People's whatever it's going to be called, might help a lot. It's kind of, there's no lesser of two evils anymore. You know, it's like balancing the seesaw, standing between the two, less party politics, more balanced, less bashing of Democrats, and like who was it? Dustin in New Jersey said, there's extreme elements in both parties. We need that middle party. We need something to balance the other two. Maybe it would help solve a lot of problems.
Well, last year I probably would have agreed with you, but the lesson we are seeing out of this last election and the tremendous disappointment of the Trump administration is that political parties don't matter anymore. Candidates don't matter anymore. The oligarchs are calling all the shots, and they'll do exactly the same thing with a new third party, even if they allowed one to come into existence, which they don't want, because it means they'll have to spend more money donating to 3 candidates instead of just 2. At this point, I don't see a way for this system to be saved. I think we're past that point, and I'm seeing a lot of anger out there on the web, where people, like the article that we had yesterday, it's time to delete the federal government. I can't find a reason to argue against that.
Yeah. Well, that leaves, if it didn't go through, and I'm going to hold out hope, but we're talking about solutions, food pantries. Every small town and even big cities should have more than one. Food pantries, you've got a local Texas grocery that's giving canned goods and bread, no meat, but things like canned breads and goods that are, and goods that are coming near their sell-by date, and they're donating them. And I tell you, I don't care if I'm rich or poor. If I got to where I couldn't feed the people, I mean, I try to, we with gardeners can put in our stuff over there too if we have extra, and I would not rule that out as a means to feed the people. Ours started with just all the churches in the area getting together, funding the things. They got a little rent house they worked out of, and then it made enough money from donations or whatever to get a building built. And boy, those baskets from the local grocery store come rolling through there with all this bread and stuff, and there's people donating their time to divvy it up, and it's just really a going thing. So, well, and also in getting out of debt, of course, is an absolute necessary.
Yeah, that's the hard part. I mean, they're intentionally trying to dump more debt on you to keep you from breaking free. That's the push to the cashless society, keep you using the debit cards and the credit cards, keep you a debt slave, and that's what's going on there. You're very lucky to have the support of your local supermarkets for your food bank, because in a lot of places now, especially the large chain grocery stores, they're throwing the expired food in the trash bin and pouring bleach all over it because their attitude is we don't want the food to get out there for free. People need to keep coming to the store and buying food. And grocery prices, of course, are continuing to go up like crazy, especially around here. And we're actually seeing in a couple of places where supermarkets are trying to sue food pantries as unfair competition.
No, you're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. You know, the goal of fascism is that we are all totally dependent on the corporate supply chain for everything: food, medicine, electricity, water. Next, it'll be air.
That's as bad as garage sales getting taxed or something. I mean, that's
they were trying
ridiculous.
that too. They were trying that too.
Yeah,
It failed for a lack of enforceability.
Good. Well, I've noticed at the cash registers of the big box grocery stores, they have little credit card things you can apply for, and as the prices go up, they're going to hope to divvy those out. There's got to be a way around that. Don't use them, and I know you want to eat, but push for your churches to get together with the smaller grocery stores that are like state-run grocery stores to do this, and come here to Fredericksburg, Texas, and check out what they've got going here. Down on Highway Street, and use that as a model or whatever it takes, because Episcopal Church started it, by the way, and we brought in everyone. We had a big walk once for money, you know, and all this stuff, and it just has really worked, and it's just expanded, and they're going to start they're going to start offering you those credit cards, and I'm going to say this and I'll go, but they have a little section there if you want to write a check or use cash. It's turning into a postage stamp size area. They have all these machines around you now. If you know, they're making it as hard as possible for you to use your cash. And I'm going to look at the, you know, prepaid Visa option, because I hate the thought. If you want to be a slave to all this globalism, then just use that credit card that they give you. But if you can do a prepaid one, go down to one car, anything, you know, just do what you can. And I'm going to hope that you and Claire can get out of there soon. I tell you, come visit us here. It's nice here. Yeah,
we really would like to get back to the mainland. We're very nervous about developments here. I can't put it any other way. We're broke. That is basically where we are.
Yeah, I know. And I'm not worried about you. I'm just going to feel, I just know you want to be here, and I want you to realize that somehow. But, you know, for those that are here and having a hard time, you know, don't rule out all the other options that keep you from off those cards, because that's where the slavery, that's the slave state is all wrapped up in that debt, and they're putting them everywhere they can. And it's only the big box ones, you know, the local people. We can stand together, you know, we can stand together. I think there's other options, and every time I think of something, I'll let you know.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I do appreciate that here. And so we're going to let you go and get on back to the news here. Thank you for the phone call. And again, the lines are open. I hope. We seem to be having all kinds of very mysterious and strange technical issues today at RBN, and the number is 800-313-9443. Speaking of the Veterans Affairs and my dubious feeling about Donald Trump's announcement of a new VA oversight office, the House Veterans Affairs Committee was running an Inspectors General probe to the treatment of a blind Navy veteran in October during a very lengthy emergency room wait at the North Las Vegas VA Medical Center. And they asked for the surveillance video from the VA hospital, only to be told it had been deleted. Isn't that amazing how, despite all the video surveillance, video that might embarrass somebody within the government, keeps vanishing, like the dash cam video from when the police beat up that 80-year-old guy. Getting into the computers here, Facebook has implemented a new filter on articles that are about President Trump. The comments are being biased so that the anti-Trump comments are at the top of all the comments, even when other comments have more likes. They're not sorting them by the likes. They're simply sorting them anti-Trump on first and the good stuff down below. So all of these corporations have become handmaidens to the government's propaganda. Instead of Facebook, let's call it the Ministry of Propaganda. But a lot of people are starting to abandon Facebook. They're abandoning Google. They're abandoning Twitter. And it's starting to show because Twitter's revenue is plunging. And this is the first time since Twitter began. Their ad revenues are starting to fall apart. And Twitter's cutting costs, trying to manage the decline. People are going to these other startup companies like Gab. Because right now there doesn't seem to be any censorship over there. Now, General Electric apparently has had a bit of a goof for what they call their protection relays. Apparently, there's a bug, a weakness, a security vulnerability, and it could potentially open up transmission systems to a grid-scale attack. Now, power stations and things like that are air-gapped. They're isolated from the general Internet. But the Internet is used to communicate with devices out in the field, such as transformers, distribution, even just sensors that are monitoring the system to find out when something fails. Those are using the regular Internet. So those outside devices are open to cyber attack. So they're rushing out these patches here. The 3 New York University researchers say they cracked the homebrew encryption in the ancient GE multilin systems. And the abstract is light on actual details, which is probably a good thing. But it appears the researchers found a hard-coded password inside the system. And they said, we completely broke the homebrew encryption algorithm used by these protection and management devices to authenticate users and allow privileged operations. Knowledge of the passcode enables an attacker to completely own the device and disconnect sectors of the power grid at will, locking operators out to prolong the attack. Well, that really was kind of dumb, having a hard-coded password in there. And it is a major ongoing problem when you're developing systems. And you can understand from the point of view of those who manufacture and maintain computerized equipment that they want to have a hard-coded password so that if the end user messes up, scrambles the password file, that they can still get in to fix it. But if those passwords become known, if somebody is able to identify them, then your device turns into a security hole. And there are already so many of them intentionally designed and inserted at the behest of the National Security Agency. Now, over in India, they have ordered Internet service providers in Kashmir to immediately block Facebook, Twitter, and 20 other social media sites and online applications for 1 month after several videos and photos depicting alleged abuses of Kashmirs by Indian security forces sparked outrage. And again, we're seeing this behavior all over the globe. They're going to go on doing bad things. They're only angry when somebody complains about it. So they kill the messenger, which is exactly what they're doing. They're killing the messengers. They're not correcting the problem. They're killing the messengers. The same thing with all this talk about prosecuting Julian Assange for publishing this classified data. Assange himself did not steal that classified data. Technically, the ones who leaked it and gave it to him are the ones who actually broke the law. Assange, as a distributor, if you will, is protected by the First Amendment. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just heard that last caller, Sherry.
Yes.
And I've been thinking about this before anyway. I'm beginning to believe that pure capitalism, or what I call predatory capitalism, is just as bad as pure socialism, which is really communism. Neither one is doing it any good, and it's both really comes to a dictatorship. Even like when you're talking about some of these tech companies like Facebook, Google, Twitter. These are like the robber barons of today. I mean, they're much too powerful. They're trying to quell free speech. And I do think it's time people wised up and started to realize that socialism, the term socialism, I'm not talking about pure socialism, but maybe the type that Bernie Sanders or maybe Tulsi Gabbard want, not all that bad. You know, especially if we start enforcing these Sherman antitrust laws and making it clear to these corporations who's really in charge, that we the people are in charge. And this government has to make it understood that they're supposed to be for the people of this country, not for these fat cats that have all kinds of special interests. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, you're absolutely right. The reason we're in the mess that we're in is because corporations are allowed to become monopolies. And there used to be laws in the United States to prevent that because it was understood when one single corporation monopolized a particular area of endeavor, costs would go up, quality would go down, and the management of the corporation would tend to become rather abusive of their power and privilege. It's like the laws we used to have that limited how much media any one entity could own to preserve a diversity of opinion. And all those laws have been rescinded, and now we have this rise of the corporate oligarchy, which basically feels like they can do whatever they want to do. And we see that in the way that Google and Facebook are censoring online discussion. We see it in the way that airlines are maltreating their passengers, their paying customers. There's actually this attitude coming out that ordinary people are not to be respected. Just get their money and, you know, give them enough to keep them from complaining too much, and that's business as usual.
Well, Mike, as far as I know, things like the Sherman antitrust laws are still in the books. They're just not being enforced. Now, I know Glass-Steagall was taken away back in the 1990s, which is a shame, and it probably caused the whole 2008 fiasco. But as far as I know, antitrust laws are still on the books. So they're not being enforced. They're just being ignored.
Yeah, I was doing a quick little search here, and the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed in 1890. It is still in effect, but over at the Mises Institute, I'm seeing an article where they're arguing for a repeal. You know, that all of the antitrust laws ought to be repealed. Well, they're being ignored, and we can see the results. A repeal is only going to make it worse. You know,
that's what I disagree with.
And you're absolutely right. The question is, who's running the country, the corporations or the people? Right now, sadly, it's the corporations. Mark, I'm going to hold.
That's right.
I'm going to hold you over. Don't hang up. I'll come right back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking with Mark in North Carolina. We're talking about socialism versus capitalism versus fascism. And I know a lot of people talk about socialism a lot, but the reality is we're living in a fascist economic dictatorship. Mark?
Yeah, what I was going to say... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm ready. I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the things I disagree with Ron Paul, and I love Ron Paul. I mean, I think the man is great. For the most part, he's right on, especially when it comes to foreign policy and all that, and war and peace. But one thing I disagree with him on is what you just said, like the Van Dies economic policies. You cannot just let corporations or business do whatever they want, because they will exploit. Greed unfortunately, greed is a part of human nature. And by the way, it works that way with communism too. People think pure socialism will work. It won't, because a lot of these so-called leaders of the communist movement themselves are greedy and like power, and they'll take advantage.
Yeah, I mean, the former Soviet Union made a mockery of Marxism by creating the most powerful ruling class in history to supposedly support the classless society.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, I have a cousin of mine who's actually an actual communist. He's on Facebook. As a matter of fact, kind of like he got off my news feed because he didn't like some of the, stuff I was saying about his beliefs. But one thing he did say, and kind of like goes with what you just said, it's like he said Trotsky, for instance, was a true communist, but that Stalin was not. That Stalinism is not really communism. That Trotsky was what communism was supposed to be about. I don't know if that's really true or not. From what I understand, Trotsky himself was kind of a globalist, and a lot of these neocons today are former Trotskyites themselves. But this is what he claims. I don't know what you think about that, or what, Karl Marx is. And, he also said Marx and Engels originally did not believe in the Soviet style of communism. But I guess you probably know more about that than I do.
Well, the system will take you in and it will corrupt you. Alan Greenspan, before he became chairman of the Federal Reserve, he was a proponent of sound money and a return to the gold standard, and as soon as he got that job at the Federal Reserve, he was all in favor of printing presses and computers and fairy tale money.
Well, you see with Trump, too, now. All of a sudden now he's campaigned against globalism, and now he's surrounded by globalism. He said he didn't want to interfere in other people's business, militarily or any other way, really, and you see what he's doing now. So, I don't know. Like you said, it's not only money, but power definitely, like I said, power corrupts. Absolute power absolutely corrupts. And that seems to be part of human nature. But it's up to, I think it's up to we the people to put an end to this, to stop. Even if we have to start overthrowing these people, even if it comes to some kind of a civil war. We can't let it just keep on going on, because it's going to destroy this country. And it's
already destroying our country. I mean, certainly the country that I was born into, the country that we all thought we were living in, that country is gone. It has been destroyed.
No.
And I really don't like all... Okay, we're going to have to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, earlier in the program, I was talking about these announcements coming out of the White House that Trump was backing off the militarism with North Korea, that they were going to use sanctions and diplomatic pressure. And I said, it sounds good. I'm not sure. And so right now, I'm looking at this article in Sputnik News. The U.S. Pacific Commander, Pyongyang's actions could justify invasion of North Korea. And apparently Admiral Harry Harris, Jr., and this is just today, saying he's refusing to take an American invasion of North Korea off the table. So, again, who's really in charge right now? That is a legitimate question here. Another article coming out of RINF.com, the high costs of U.S. warmongering against North Korea. Well, it's not just North Korea. Look how much 16 years of war has cost this country. Walk down the street of your town, village, city. Look at the cracked pavement, the corroded metal fixtures, the decayed infrastructure, the potholes, the leaking pipes, the homelessness, the empty, the retail vacancies, the boarded up homes. The wartime economy has taken a hideous toll on the American people. I think it's time we all basically said enough is enough is enough. These war hawks are going to get us into a mess we cannot get out of. And we're going to lose it. We're going to lose this next war. The problem with our current warmongering is they're all caught up in the groupthink that America has never lost a war. And there was Vietnam, obviously. There was the fact that the United States did not win the Korean War. It's still technically in progress. And contrary to what you see in Hollywood films and TV shows, the United States did not win World War I and World War II all by itself. In fact, they delayed until they could see which side was likely going to win, and then they hopped on in. This is a very troubling development. Alrighty, getting on back to the world of computers and computer abuses. Our technology has become decadent. It has become very, very decadent, and I think this is a good illustration. Amazon has an upgrade to their personal assistant, Alexa. It's called the Echo Look device. It costs $200. And what it does is, while you're dressing, it watches you in a camera and tells you whether or not the outfit looks good or not. And no doubt its decision on what is a good-looking outfit is based on the current fashion trends. If you're wearing something that looked good last year, it's probably going to say, no, it's out of style. At which point, Amazon will send you a whole bunch of ads for the current clothing or whatever else is going on. I think that's ridiculous. Our technology has become decadent. Now, a little bit of good news. Over in Great Britain, the Central Criminal Court of England and Wales found 20-year-old Adam Mudd guilty to creating a malware program designed to perform distributed denial of service attacks on computer networks. It was called the Titanium Stressor, and is thought to have caused 1.7 million cyber attacks since its creation in 2013. He was running a hacker-for-hire operation. People would call him up and give him money, and he would take down a targeted website for a certain interval of time. Now, if Great Britain can find these cyber criminals, why can't the NSA? Why can't the FBI? Why can't the CIA? That's an important question to be asking. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a break here on the computer and talking points. I want to share something with you. A while back, I did a story about how when the Radio Shack at the bottom of the hill closed its doors, and they had a clearance sale, going out of business sale, and I picked up a Grundig shortwave radio because Grundig is a well-respected name, only to find out that somebody had bought the Grundig name and slapped it onto some incredibly badly made merchandise, which is another reason people stopped going to Radio Shack. Is because they would see products with no names on them, and they really would fall apart. I did get a few things from Radio Shack that really were good and held up. I got a digital multimeter that is very nicely made. But the shortwave radio was a disaster. I was trying to tune into Voice of North Korea, and I discovered that the digital frequency display was more than a megahertz off of the desired frequency. And obviously I could do a correction and everything. And I was about to open it up to see if I could maybe find some kind of an adjustment to get it back in line. And then I discovered that the third shortwave band didn't work at all. When you switched it into band 3 shortwave, it went back to the AM band. So at that point, I said, okay, that's it. Now, the good news is, and for people of you watching on BAM User, this is what it looks like. I went out on eBay, and I found a really, really good deal on a Texan PL880 shortwave radio. And before I bought it, I went on out and I read the consumer reviews about it. It is from China, and it is one of that category of Chinese products that is made very, very well. People like to talk about bad quality Chinese imports at the big box stores, but China is a manufacturing nation, and they will manufacture what the importers ask for. If you ask for a high quality product, like the iPhone is made in China, or this radio, you will get one. And if you ask for the cheapest piece of crud possible, you will get that as well. So this is an unsolicited endorsement on this radio unit. It's very small in size, so it will fit in your emergency evacuation kit in the event of hurricane, tornado, nuclear war. And it's AM, FM stereo, and shortwave bands, longwave bands, marine band, and has upper and lower single sideband, for those of you who like to listen to the ham connections. And it works really, really well. I was trying it out this morning. So once again, if you're looking for a good shortwave radio, the Texan PL880, and I understand Texan makes, and that's T-E-C-S-U-N, they make a bunch of radios. Some of them are more high-end, more sophisticated than this one, but this one is certainly adequate to my needs. And I'm having a little bit of fun with that one. Now then, getting on back to things, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Something else you may want to think about for your emergency evacuation kit. In the event the cell phone system goes down, you might want to think about getting some two-way handheld radios, such as the Bofengs. And you need to understand what we used to call Citizens Band has now been split up into two sets of frequencies. In fact, you can go down to like Toys R Us, and they have two-way radios that cover family radio service, which is what they call Citizens Band now, and the general mobile radio service. And what a lot of people don't understand, it's in the manual, but it's in fine print. You need to get an FCC license to use those GMRS frequencies because they're running at a higher power than family radio service. But it's very worthwhile to do, and it gives you a way of being able to talk to your family members should you need to be separated when the cell phones are not working. Oh, and for those of you concerned about nuclear war, potassium iodate, another good thing to have in your survival kit. Getting on back to the news here. Storm drops a foot of snow at higher elevations near Steamboat Springs. And let's see, Thursday's weather for Duluth and the Northland, more wintry weather expected. Another one here, is it actually snowing in Bristol in April? Gosh darn that, human-caused global warming. You don't suppose Al Gore and his buddies were lying to us about that one, do you? I think so. We seem to be living in an age of scams. Everything's a scam. You don't know what to trust anymore. They want you to trust everything, but that, of course, would be extraordinarily foolish. I wrote an article, which I think I posted on my website recently, called Of the Liars, By the Liars, and For the Liars, which is basically a highlight history, if you will, of all the times rulers lie to their people, because it is something rulers always do without exception. History's greatest frauds and hoaxes are in there, including Assad gassing his own. And I think maybe it needs a companion article of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers. Because it almost seems like a large part of America's current commerce consists of scams. As the economy tightens up, and we saw this in 1930, as the economy tightens up and the government cuts funding for enforcement of the laws, where legitimate businesses cannot succeed, the scammers come on out. And that's just a reality, and you need to be aware of that here. Now, apparently, China-owned Smithfield Foods is using a U.S. Department of Defense grant to supply pig organs for transplantation into humans. And that's not as far-fetched as you might think, because as it turns out, it's been done before. It's been done before. And it turns out that human bodies can accept pig organs with very little problems regarding rejection. And certainly it's much easier to get a pig organ than it is to get an organ from another human being. And we know that black market organ trafficking is another big business that has cursed our current time. So this may move to be a solution to that. Now, let's see. This is a really cool article. China is in talks with the European Space Agency about a permanent settlement on the moon. Now, if you watch the science education channels here in the United States, they talk about NASA plans for a permanent base on the moon, probably at one of the poles where they'll have sun and shadow all the time, which could actually be a good way of generating electricity as well. But they're actually talking about it. And it's kind of exciting to see these other countries continuing the push out into space. And apparently the talks are very serious, and they could actually attempt to do it in the very near future. Now, of course, once they're up there and they start poking around, they might actually find something valuable on the moon that's worth setting up an infrastructure to get there and back on a regular basis. Robert Heinlein is one of my favorite authors, and unless I'm greatly mistaken, he was the author of a story, The Man Who Sold the Moon, about a guy who basically was able to privatize and fund lunar transport on the promise that there were going to be all kinds of wonderful things on the moon. And I don't know if that's actually going to happen. It's certainly worth looking at. Now, if you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and you are greatly concerned about the commercial pharmaceutical medications prescribed for that as having adverse effects, which they do, it's actually been found, according to Natural Blaze, that orange oil seems to alleviate PTSD. So does marijuana, but that's not legal in all states. But oranges are legal pretty much everywhere. They're looking at. Okay, we're going to get on back and see what's happening over in the current feed. And once again, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the cost of warmongering in North Korea. Let's see what else we've got. I've actually hit the bottom of my talking points is the problem, which is why I need some people to call on in. And my server is also under attack at the same time. What a terrible day. Speaking of scams, this one just came on in. Apparently, the largest online supplier of conflict-free diamonds has turned out to be a scam. Brilliant Earth has scammed thousands of customers. They claim to provide their customers with the exact origin of the diamonds and track the diamonds from mine to consumer so that no human rights violations are taking place. And apparently, these claims have been shown to be fraudulent. So it was another scam. Now, the very idea of a conflict diamond itself may be a scam as well, because diamonds are pretty much a monopoly. And their prices are kept up with the illusion of scarcity, which is itself another scam. Diamonds are not rare. There are enough diamonds out there for every married woman to be wearing one, if not 2 or 3, for every shopping mall to have 3 or 4 stores full of diamonds. That doesn't sound like it's a rare object to me. That's basically the claim that is out there. And obviously, the current diamond monopoly does not want any competition. So when countries find diamonds on their own territory, and the diamond monopoly doesn't want them entering the market and being competition, then they're conflict diamonds. They're bringing war and human rights violations. And usually there isn't much of anything to substantiate that. It's just a claim that's made on up. Okay. All right. Let's see what we're going to find here. All right. I'm going to go back and talk about this situation in Korea, because I'm looking at this article where the commander of the Pacific Fleet, which is based right here in Hawaii. Now, the fleet itself is further west. It's over in Guam and other forward sites. But command control of the Pacific Fleet takes place right here on the island of Oahu, which is why we are nervous about being a potential target. Whether it's North Korea, but more to the point, now the tensions with China are ratcheting on up. China really can hit this rock, and they can hit it hard. And that's of concern. But the alarming thing here is to see so many people in the corporate media and within the government itself continuing to go along this war path, if you will, even with the exposure that so many of these previous incursions, conflicts, regime changes were based on lies and fairy tales and false flags. But it's like we were commenting about that original article, politicized intelligence. Once the government commits itself to a lie, all subsequent foreign policy decisions are made on the basis of that lie rather than the truth. And so our foreign policy, at least right now, seems to be built pretty much on a fiction. They've created an alternate reality of a world that's hostile to America, of insane foreign leaders with weapons of mass destruction who will not hesitate to destroy us. And as we pointed out many, many times before, the only nation to use nuclear weapons is the United States. And the other nations that have nuclear weapons have them to deter being invaded. And with the U.S. history of aggression and belligerency over the last 16 years, in fact, since the end of World War II, I do not fault any country that wants to acquire nuclear weapons to discourage a U.S. invasion. What the U.S. wants is a world totally disarmed and easy to invade and plunder. And that's what's behind all this screaming about weapons of mass destruction and denuclearization of all these other countries. They're all potentially targets. Now, on the website earlier today, I posted a video clip from the Duck and Cover Bert the Turtle movie. It was made in 1951, the year before I was born. But I remember being shown this film in school about what to do in a nuclear attack. And if you watch it now, it's almost laughable propaganda, because everything they show you in the film, what you should do in the event of a nuclear attack, none of it will work. But the whole point of the film was not to actually protect the American people from a nuclear attack, but to convince the American people that nuclear attack was survivable in order to undermine the growing opposition to any nation having any nuclear weapons at all. In the post-World War II years, those who had actually seen what those weapons can do were just horrified at the potential. We're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And people are sending me links to stories about various scams. And this one really kind of stuck out, if you would. And it's a story about this high schooler. Kid in high school had a fake gold scam where he was counterfeiting these encased gold bars from the Perth Mint. Now, you know, when you buy gold bars from a reputable mint, you will get it in a sealed plastic package, and there's all kinds of numbering. And apparently he just counterfeited that and put fake gold bars in there, and he made about $60,000, and was exposed when one of his customers, who was a jeweler, realized it was a fake. So that's of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers. Another listener wrote in to confirm I was correct. My memory isn't fading that much from age. The Man Who Sold the Moon was written by Robert Heinlein, and he is definitely one of my favorite science fiction authors. All right, we're going to take some phone calls here. Brendan in San Francisco, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I heard you were desperate for callers, so no, I'm kidding. Mike, I try to think outside the box. I try to encourage people to do the same. And with the regards to the New World Order, whatever you want to call them, I'm thinking there has to be a legal mechanism, even though we know the court systems are corrupt. There has to be some listeners out there that may be versed in the laws that we could put together a case against the New World Order, against the government, whatever you want to call them, and just bring them to like the World Court or the United Nations, whatever scumbag organization that we know is corrupted, but just to try to put a public face on this, present a legal case for this, shredding of our Constitution or treason or whatever it is, like kind of use the tools of the machine against them. What are your thoughts?
The only way that you would be considered to have standing either at the United Nations or the World Court is you would have to have proof of human rights violations by the U.S. government. Outside of something like that, both the World Court and the United Nations refrain from tinkering in the governance of the member nations, figuring that really is up to the government and the people. In any event, we know that the United States exerts tremendous control over the United Nations, in part because of its location in New York City. And we've seen the World Court has also been compromised on a number of issues as well. I hate to say this because I do not want to see a revolution or a civil war in the streets of this country. But we seem to be past the point where there is any open path to changing the course of the nation. We thought we were doing that last November. We didn't. And that's why earlier in the week I had that graphic up on the website of John F. Kennedy, because he was famous for this quote: "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable." And sadly, tragically, horrifically, I think we're there. And I'm hearing it from a lot of people. I'm reading it all over the Internet where everybody is saying that we're down to the last option. It's the choice between standing up or being on our knees.
One thought I had was kind of, let's say Trump has been compromised with little kitties or whatever the heck these perverted individuals are into. What if we gave them a pass and said, during this term that you're currently in, we're going to give you a pass on whatever proclivities or laws that have been broken, but it's at the end of your term you have to resign or whatever. But like try to get the mechanism back. Like, I mean, we know they're trying to normalize pedophilia, and it goes really dark and deep.
There's a lot of noise on this line. Are you doing something with your phone besides talking?
Oh, I think I was brushing against. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. All
right, Mike.
The problem.
Did you copy what I said?
Yeah, I copied what you said. And we're coming up on a commercial break, but I'm going to keep you over it. The problem is that we cannot speak for the entire American people that we are not going to react in horror if it does turn out, in fact, that Jeff Epstein made a video of Trump with an underage girl. And Trump knows that. So in terms of practicality, it's not going to work. We need to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be back in 4 minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Brendan in San Francisco. And Brendan, if you've been listening to my show for any length of time, you know that I always oppose the idea of a violent revolution or a civil war in this country. My concern is we may be reaching the point where it's impossible to stop one. And we're seeing a lot of violence in the streets of America already. Now, it's always a sign, it's Black Lives Matter this, or it's refugees that. But I think just looking at the sheer level of the violence overall, I think it is indicative of a growing rage within the American people. And they still haven't figured out where to direct it. And that allows others to direct it for them, saying, don't be angry with the government, be angry with Black Lives Matter, or be angry with the white people.
Right.
I mean, that seems to be a favorite theme. Be angry with the gays, be angry with the straights. And they're trying to turn our violence against us. But at the point where the American people realize what the problem actually is, we may be in for a very, very ugly situation.
I think a lot of the anger that we've seen is from these fools that thought, I knew Bernie Sanders didn't have a chance, and I had a discussion. I would have voted for Bernie just because that's where my instincts were, even though he's totally compromised. The anger is from these fools that believed in Clinton. No, they believed in Bernie, and he got robbed. And then they misdirected their anger at we'll call them the right. I'm not a Republican. I'm not. If anything, I'm anti-war, and I hedged my bet on Trump, and I feel like a complete fool. I'm not kidding. I've lost. I literally got fired from the UC system because once they found out I was a Trump supporter, they got me out of the UC, and then I lost a relationship over this. And I was just trying to stand my ground and go with the facts and the truth. And that's what my theme has been with you, is that we have the truth, we have the facts. We're witnessing them run the playbook in front of us, and I don't want to feel like I'm powerless to stop it. With all this brain power we have and these listeners, I'm looking at your numbers. You're getting like 1.3 million people, from what I can tell on BAM User. It's like among all these people, we have to come up with a plan to stop these fools. I mean, this isn't, if we crash like Russia, it's not going to be like when Russia crashed, because they're vultures waiting to gobble up the corpses or to pick the flesh off our bones.
Well, that was true in the Soviet Union. The oligarchs, that's what the oligarchs were about. And fortunately, the Russians were very lucky to get Putin as a leader who kicked the oligarchs out.
Right. Well, so the battle that I can see is winning the hearts and minds, not to be cliche, but I have family members that watch Trevor Noah, and I swear I didn't know who he was, and I was listening to this rhetoric from this guy, and I was infuriated that a guy would come from another country and sit here and become a subversive tool. And my family members are sitting there laughing away, and they're laughing at their own demise. And comedy, I love comedy. It's such a powerful tool. and it's being used to destroy. I mean, Trump's gone. As far as I'm concerned, the new hashtag is one-term president. I mean, listen, he is selling us out so hard and doing it in such a public manner. It's almost like we're being humiliated. We're doing the, the walk of shame.
Well,
I would never wear
I would look at it another way. Yeah, I mean, I've already thrown away my Trump is my president shirt. I probably should have burned it on a live video feed, but I didn't realize it until after it was gone. But certainly Donald Trump bombed his second term at that Syrian airfield with the cruise missile attack. But I think there's a larger issue behind that, and that is that the American people, regardless of their party affiliation, are now in fact realizing that their votes don't really matter. It doesn't matter who they vote into these offices. The system will take them over, absorb them like a giant amoeba, feeding on them, and the system will still move forward with its own agenda, which is more wealth, more power, and more war. And once the American people as a whole realize that they're disenfranchised, that's going to accelerate the anger and the rage. Because what has kept Americans more or less in their place, despite the skyrocketing cost of everything, the plunge in earnings, the deterioration of our lives and living standards, is that somehow, that illusion, that somehow or other we voted for this and we should go along with it. And when the American people finally realize that, hey, my vote really didn't matter, this is the ruling class doing this, then you're going to start to see a real schism between the people and the government start to open up.
Yeah. Hey, before you took the break, we left off on Epstein.
Yes.
And I don't know if you saw this or not, but there's a really compelling case. The young lady that Prince Andrew was filmed with,
yes,
from Epstein Island, she was an employee at Mar-a-Lago. Now, I never heard this, but this is, I'm going to take it at face value. And also, Epstein's compound is only, I think it's less than a mile from Mar-a-Lago. So you start connecting the dots, and I think that's a theme that we should push, is try to connect the dots. It's not much of a stretch to think that they got this guy compromised to the hilt.
Yeah, it's possible, but like I said earlier, I no longer care how it came about. We're trying to deal with the end result, which is we are still on the path to a crashed economy and global war. Now, to be accurate, Jeff Epstein's South Palm Beach place, he sold it. When he got his conviction for the sex underage thing, he sold it and he got out of there, and now he's got this new place down in the Caribbean. He's got his own little island with a new pleasure palace on it. And so he's outside U.S. jurisdiction for what he's doing on down there. But again, I think anybody would have to actually be a moron to go down to Epstein's place and play with the underage girls and not realize they're going to be recorded.
Now, you mentioned Robert David Steele the other day. Did you see the video that he posted of, he's a former banker, very high echelon banker, and he said that he was allowed access to the elite circles, and that they brought him in slowly, and he observed, he took all the pleasures of women and things of that nature, and then the further along his career went, the darker it turned, to the point where they actually had him participate in a child sacrifice. And there's a really great video, you got to see it, and Steele posted it, so it gives it an air of credibility to me. He said that during this in an interaction, he reflected on his childhood and the abuse that he suffered, and at that point he could no longer go along, and it affected his work performance to the point where he had to get out. So this guy is a high-level banker confirming all our worst fears, and you got to see the video. It's like a 20-minute long thing, and he breaks it down.
I'll take a look for it, but you know, I've often suggested in the past that maybe the rite of passage into the elite is that you do something truly horrible so that you can be blackmailed and you are reliable and dependable because you can be controlled. And that is certainly that's certainly something we've seen in dictatorships throughout history. Anyway, Brendan, I'm going to let you go. We've got two callers who have been waiting very, very patiently, and I want to get to them here. So we're going to switch over to Nico in Southern California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Nico, are you there? I guess we lost him. Can Nico?
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, what's on your mind?
All right, so, well, a couple of things, but I thought that you could make a shirt, and it'll look like the Make America Great Again shirt, but what you put on there is, I voted to make America great again, but all I got was the stupid shirt.
I like that. I like that. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. That's great.
Yeah, I thought you would like that. And then, so you know, I jumped on the show a little bit late, so forgive me if you already reported on this. But did you hear about Donald Trump? And I think the Secretary of the Interior is involved, and they're going to be reviewing a lot of these national park land grabs that they use to collateralize, you know, the balance sheets of our country.
Yes. It's actually it's the national monuments, not the national parks.
Oh, forgive me.
Yeah, the difference is the parks are built up and developed to support tourism. The national monument is simply a designation that says what used to belong to all these private ranchers and everything is now the property of the U.S. government, and you can't go in there.
Well, you were the first person I heard mention, and it really told the story. I mean, it was on your All Wars or Bankers Wars, which everybody should listen to. Everybody should listen to that. And, you know, talking about how once we got off the gold standard, that's how they actually collateralized our balance sheet.
Yes.
And apparently it was the X-22 report that discussed this review of these monuments, and they did hint that what they're actually looking at is what is underneath these monuments and what we might be able to, in desperation, use to save our country that is falling apart. And I was just wondering if you heard that same strategy being discussed.
Well, that's always been the issue, but again, they're going to have to play fast and loose because the collateralization agreements with those other countries is that the land and its mineral assets are pledged as the collateral, because the land by itself does not cover the indebtedness. When Bill Clinton, for example, created the Grand Staircase Escalade Monument, what he was really doing was locking away that domestic source of low sulfur coal, which required American companies to buy coal from Indonesia from some of the Clinton cronies. In so doing, Bill Clinton actually violated Iowa's statehood agreement, which reserved the proceeds from that coal to fund the state's education program. But we have not had a government that really has much respect for the law or agreements for quite a long time, so we should not be surprised about that. They are getting desperate. The American people have been taxed into poverty. We don't have any real manufacturing anymore. Nobody wants to buy our overpriced junk products. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And now it looks like the war agenda may be on the verge of stumbling and collapsing. So, yeah, we're in the last days of the United States of America.
Yeah, that's a sad thing, Mike. And I just, you know, you've mentioned a few times recently in this week how you and the Lady Claire have felt that a lot of your work has been in vain because it looks like we're moving on to war, which is what you guys wanted to avoid. I think that your work is not in vain. You know, I started really waking up when I started listening to Alex Jones, and I stumbled upon your work, and your work has been what has actually allowed me to really be awake. And I'm not taking anything away from Alex Jones, but I really just prefer your work. And I think that please don't be disheartened. Please continue to do what you do so that once everything falls apart, we all understand what the problem was, and we have a good chance at least rebuilding the nation into something that's going to be for the people. I really, really want you to understand that you are making a difference for a lot of people, and please understand that.
Well, I will confess to being very discouraged and disheartened by Trump's first 100 days. And when he won last November, I was thinking there was a chance to change the course of the nation, to change the course on Claire and my life. And we're back in the same situation we were before. And I am discouraged, and I will admit to it. And a few days from now, I'll snap out of it. But I am having a bit of a crisis about all of this.
We listeners believe in you, Mike. And, you know, I've sent some donations your way recently.
Thank you.
If you make that shirt, I will, of course. It's, you know, it's well worth every single penny. I don't have a lot of money, but a couple $100 here and there, you know, I'll do that. And if you make those shirts, I'll buy a number of them, at least like 5, maybe 10. I
will get that made up after the show today. So thank you very much. And we're going to let you go, and we've got 2 more callers I think we can fit in before the end of the show. Dan in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just think there's this axis of evil mantra that they keep spewing at us. And, you know, I know there's a connection here in Canada to that, the origins of that. As you'll remember, David Frum, who is one of the editors at The Atlantic. It's like a far right-wing neocon rag. And he used to be Bush's speechwriter. His sister is a senator here in Canada. She's on the Canada-Israeli committee, and she's been appointed chair of the Task Force for International Cooperation on Holocaust Education, Remembrance, and Research.
Okay.
So there's a connection there. And also, their mother, Barbara Frum, she was Canada's Diane Sawyer, or Katie Couric. She was on our CBC for a number of years during the late 80s, early 90s. So I think it's like, you know, I don't know if Trump is, he's sort of, he's up against a usurped nation. I think he's been usurped by Israel, or at least Israeli dual citizen neocons. These are the war hawks.
No, we're under foreign puppet rule. We're under foreign puppet rule.
These think tanks. They have these think tanks that are all you know, Crystal and Kagan and his Kagan's wife. What's her name? Victoria Nuland.
Yes.
I mean, that's what you're going up against. That's what Trump is. Trump thought he had a big ego, but I think they probably told him, you know, we run the show and we'll let you have 4 years, 8 years if you're lucky. And that's it.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, well, we're going to let you go here, and we're coming up on our last commercial break of the day. I've got one more call, but I'm going to hold that into the last segment. And it is very discouraging, but I think, again, what the American people learned from this last election is that we are disenfranchised. Our votes really don't count, that there is massive election fraud, that the elections are really just theater to convince us that however badly we are being treated by the government, that somehow we deserve it because we voted for it. And that is probably one of the biggest lies we have been told by our government. We'll be back in 3 minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we take our last phone call, I've gotten quite a few emails asking again about this shortwave radio. And once again, the brand is Texan, T-E-C-S-U-N. It's made in China. And the specific model number, which you're not constrained to, is the PL880. And for those of you who are really into radio, it has phase-locked loop tuning and a rather sophisticated digital signal processor to help pull real signal out of the background noise. So it is definitely just so much better than that Radio Shack, sort of, kind of, maybe looks like a Grundig. All right, Martin in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there. I'm calling to say thank you for the article that is currently at the top. Blood thinning drugs, or Eltel faces 18,000 lawsuits.
Oh, my goodness. Claire must have just put that one up there. I didn't even see that one.
Well, there's a lot more to it than that. Let me give you a little bit of my background, which is I've been on warfarin since 2002. No problems with it. So I can't eat broccoli or coleslaw, big deal, you know. Once a month I go in, they do an INR, I'm always okay. One of the good things about warfarin is, like, if I were in an auto accident or something like that, they can chew you up with vitamin K and shut it down, you know, they can stop the bleeding.
Yeah, they can stop the bleeding.
Well, anyway, after reading this article that you linked to, then I brought up DuckDuckGo and did some more research. It seems that Xarelto, there is no reversal agent. Once you start bleeding, they can't stop it.
Ooh, hemophilia in a pill. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It is amazing that we live in a society where the government lets these companies sell these poorly tested, dangerous products. And again, it's a real wake-up call. Look at all those glitzy ads for prescription medicine on TV, and we're one of only, I think, 2 countries that allow prescription medication advertising in the media. And then it'll usually be followed by some ambulance chaser law firm saying, did you take this medication and suffer harm? You may be entitled to a cash settlement. It's just this giant mill moving the money around, grinding the money out of the population one way or the other. And our medical industrial complex is completely unconcerned with our real health, because if we actually got healthy, they would be out of business. Their business model requires the American people be constantly chronically ill.
Right, and of course, the revolving door, like with the Pentagon and the military contractors, well, the FDA and Big Pharma. One of the things about this is that they don't tell you that at any point, that they can't reverse it, and that is an absurd. The other thing is the Bayer's response to the lawsuits is, well, the FDA approved it, therefore you can't sue us because the FDA said that it's
actually,
okay.
They wired that into the law. Okay, Martin, I got to let you go. Here's some music. Time for Claire and I to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire. So until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Please take what you learn here and share it with everybody that you know, especially on the issues of the rationale behind all these wars of aggression and the dangers of going into North Korea. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.